So I've dropped a few terms on you now, which I think might be important to clarify in the context of a greater model. So we're going to show you a little diagram now, which essentially tracks motivation over time. And how this works is that on the left-hand side of the axis is the axis of motivation. We have on the low end low motivation, and on the high end we have high motivation. And the line, the main line in that diagram, the curvy line that starts, it looks like kind of going up a mountain and then following down the bottom of another mountain. That line is the patient's motivation. So it's the higher the line is, the more motivation they have. The lower the line is, the less motivation they have. And the line underneath is the timeline. So that demonstrates that patients' motivation as they engage with you begins low, peaks high, and then goes low again. So let me explain to you what the differences are in terms of what explains these peaks and troughs of this motivation line. Essentially, most patients who have problems, let's take the example of somebody who wears glasses and contact lenses. They will live with this problem for years. Now, is it enough to have glasses and contact lenses and automatically want to have eye surgery? Well, obviously it isn't, because only about 2 to 5% of people who would actually benefit from something like eye surgery, who wear glasses, have actually ever had it done. What's stopping the other 95%? Is it all money? Well, no. So some, certainly. Some feel that buying glasses and contact lenses is, perhaps an easier way to spread the cost out. But if they really think about it, contact lenses and glasses, in fact, over the long term, cost more money than laser eye surgery. So it's not really all about money. What it's about mainly is the fact that some people just don't perceive the problem as big enough. Just having glasses and contact lenses doesn't automatically make you want to have surgery. Many of us live with problems that we feel are either not too bothersome to deal with, or only bother us here and there to the point where we might want to feel like we want to fix it for a moment, but then the moment passes as we adapt to dealing with the hassle as we go. Now, for a small percentage of people, these problems that they deal with on a regular basis, they get a little beyond bothersome. So what we have here are daily hassles that escalate over time. Somebody might be dealing with the contact lenses over time, and they might feel it's getting worse and worse, the discomfort. Perhaps they have infections. Perhaps they've noticed that they're getting more eye problems as a result, reducing the level of spontaneity that they feel. Perhaps they've had events where they misplaced their contact lenses or their glasses during a holiday and were unable to recover them, which greatly reduced their level of convenience and enjoyment they had in that holiday. So there might be a whole host of reasons that somebody may be experiencing these daily hassles over time. And typically, as I say, we tend to be able to manage these daily hassles quite comfortably by just mainly ignoring them. However, evidence suggests that we experience a lot more stress as a result of dealing with daily hassles than we even do with life-changing events such as deaths and divorces, losing a job, or other very, very important and life-changing negative events. We tend to experience stress at a greater level if it is sustained over time, almost like a little bit of like a sore or an ache that just won't go away. So what we find is that people with daily hassles over time get to a point where they reach a breaking point. Some of those people will then decide at that point that the daily hassles have become impossible to ignore, and they become motivated. What do they become motivated to do? Well, they become motivated to eradicate that daily hassle, of course. And what they aim to do then is they aim to search for alternatives, to discover ways in which they can remove that hassle, and ideally find a solution that will allow them to live on without it. Now, that's one big group of people who just kind of live with their problems over time and eventually overcome them because they decide enough is enough and I'm done with the stress. I want to have a change. There's another group of people who might have a very, very specific past motivating event or incident, I call it, that compels them to say, boom, this is too big to ignore. I have to fix it now. And that is usually some kind of dramatic event. But like I said, either they have been taunted or bullied one too many times, or they were specifically reminded of a deficiency that they feel is very important to them, or they feel like their level of enjoyment of something very important was reduced significantly as a result of the problem that they have. So what's the problem that people have for laser eye surgery? Well, we're going to get into that a little bit more, and for other procedures as well. But their problem really is dealing with their glasses and contact lenses. That's the problem they're trying to solve. And it's not just about that, but it's how it impacts their lives. So we're talking again about these daily hassles and these past motivating incidents. Now, a daily hassle that proceeds over a long period of time, or a past motivating incident that escalates and shoots up and gets somebody motivated to make a change, well, that's in fact what compels somebody to make a phone call. They begin their search, they identify solutions that might actually get at the problem-solving solution that they're looking for, and then they start calling. Now, this is the point in time at which they're most motivated than they have been before. And you might encounter patients who have done this in the past. They tried, they even went to appointments, and then they didn't do anything. That happens because their level of motivation was not sustained. They had the motivation, they acted as a result of that motivation, but there was nothing that really helped them sustain that motivation in order to follow through and overcome the natural barriers that are involved in making a big change. So what I compel you to do is to understand that this is a highly important moment for the patient. When they're calling, they are probably more motivated than you can imagine they've ever been in regards to this particular problem. What they are doing is they're crossing what I refer to as the do something line. And that do something line is the line at which they really, before underneath that line, they're compelled to just live with their problem, and it crosses the threshold to the point where they are prepared to do something. And what they do first is they start going online, or they start looking around, or they start talking to patients who've had this done before. And it takes a big level of commitment and motivation to actually pick up the phone and call somebody. Why? Because people don't tend to actually want to necessarily take those important steps to solve the problem. They just want what's after this whole business. They just want the solution to the whole thing. Making a phone call to a stranger and asking them about this problem and this issue and these solutions can in fact be quite a challenge for people. And we have to respect that and understand that. But we also have to recognize the fact that they're very motivated at this moment. So what we want to do when they phone is, of course, we want to get them in touch with those motivations. We want to help them sustain those motivations. So, for example, they might have an issue that might be bothering them or niggling at them. It may sound counterintuitive, but what we want to do is we want to encourage them to talk about that. We want to encourage them to relive those moments when they're most hassled, when they're most stressed. And the better they make their stories, the better for all of us. The more dramatic, the more colorful, the more specific, the larger it can be, the more senses you can bring into the equation, the better it's going to be for both of you. Number one, they're going to become much more in touch with that motivation if they recall it through memory. Memory and motivation are almost inexorably linked because our memories are what holds our emotions, and it's our emotions that foster motivation. There's a reason why the word emotion and motivation are so linked. It's because motivation stems as a result of being in touch with our emotions. And our emotions are typically submerged until we recall them, until somebody invites us to remember those motivations and those emotions. So, for example, I'll give you a case where, let's say you have a problem regarding something that you've purchased, and you call a customer service line, and that customer service person on the other end of the line invites you to tell them what your problem is. You tell them what the problem is. You're probably already somewhat frustrated with the problem because you have to call in the first place, and it's not fun to call customer service or tech support to get something fixed. But you're doing it, and you iterate your problem. Then they say, oh, well, that problem isn't something I deal with. I'm going to need to pass you on to somebody else to deal with that problem. So what do? They put you on hold. You might be waiting, some cheesy hold music. It might take a lot of time out of your day. Then eventually you get passed on to the second person. Now they've made you wait. You're more frustrated than you were before. And then they ask you to repeat the problem. Now what happens? You get more frustrated. The more you repeat problems or the hassles that you had, the more you get in touch with those issues, the more frustrated and angry you might become. Now, that's not so great for a customer service situation. However, it's really good for a sales situation. And the reason of the difference is because if they begin to see you as the vehicle to solve this frustrating problem they have, well, the more likely they are to take action with you. If they see you as the vehicle to that solution, they're going to want to get on the bus and get to that solution with you. Now, going back to the motivation over timeline, we have people go up when they make the phone call, which is what might be referred to as the initial inquiry. We have people then, after they've made that initial inquiry, their motivation will go down slightly. Now, as that happens, that's fine. That's only natural. Their motivation will go back up once they come in for the appointment. Then their motivation will reduce again after that first appointment, and then will go up again when they're ready to make the commitment for the final treatment. Our job is to keep that motivation high. And in order to do that, we have to ask them questions that are highly emotional. Now, over time, eventually their motivation will pass. Once they've had the procedure, once they've established the solution that they want to achieve, their motivation will decrease over time. That's normal. And what typically happens, say, for example, after a life-changing procedure like laser eye surgery, is they will have that procedure and they will become very accustomed to the results of that procedure and the outcome of the procedure over time. So much so that 3 to 6 months after they've had the procedure, it's almost like they forget they even had the problem that led them to have the procedure. They might even forget they even had the procedure until they're reminded about it. And then, as what humans typically do, they'll find other daily hassles to concern themselves with, other problems to deal with, and then go about seeking the solution to those problems in some other means. Your job is done. So as we proceed now, I've mentioned a couple of different things that I want you to keep in mind. The do something line is the line at which we need to keep them sustained over. And we do that by asking them a lot of questions and keeping them engaged. The daily hassles are things that we need to kind of get them to tell us. We need to make sure that they're in touch with those things and can explain them vividly. The past motivating incident is the time in the past, the moment in past that was significant enough to lead them to pick up the phone and call you and do something. The deadline is when they want to have this all done by, okay? And that typically is just before the future motivating event, which is some event in the future. For example, it might be an event like a wedding. It might be a vacation, a holiday. It might be a graduation. It might be anything that they might see in their future that they want to have the solution in place for. So we really, really want to be able to leverage both the past and the future. And I'll get into that as we proceed into the first few questions of the discovery tree.